Speaker Moyle, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This year, we are several years into the new budget setting process. How are you feeling about that now with a couple years under the committee's belt and kind of some new makeup on that committee?
It's working the right way. You know, it was a little bit tough at the start, and there was a lot of concerns. The first year we did a little bit, and the second year we did a little bit, and this year we did a little bit more. It needs more refining, but it's moving in the right direction. It's having the desired outcomes. You've seen the last 2 years with single-digit growth in budgets. We're getting the budgets under control. The next step is to delve into those bases and find some stuff there. But no, it's working. It's working well. But there's still some hiccups we need to smooth out.
There are some disagreements, we'll say, between the
disagreements. Imagine that
between the House side of the committee and the Senate side of that joint committee. The House, you guys didn't approve one of the joint rules about chairmanships of committees as part of this kind of back and forth. The existing joint rules say if you have a joint committee, it defaults to the Senate chairmanship. I can understand why the House isn't super excited about that, but JFAC has traditionally switched that gavel back and forth. Talk to me about the rule disagreements between the two chambers and how that impacts budget setting.
Yeah, the joint rules are kind of what runs the legislature, right? And they're the joint rules with the House and Senate, and it's how we operate. There's Joint Rule 11 that says when there's joint committees that the Senate controls the chair. Well, when you control the chair, you control important stuff. You control the agenda, you control what's being heard by the committee, you control what happens in the committee. For years, JFAC has operated with this unwritten agreement that they would share the chairs, that it would go back and forth. And you've seen that happen in the last 2 years. Remember, it's a joint committee. If we don't come to a resolution where we share the chair, the House doesn't have to meet with the Finance Committee. The Appropriations Committee can meet separate. And I'm not beyond going down that road if we can't figure out a way to work together. And we've worked together and things are working well. But we need to figure out how to address that Joint Rule 11 that says that the chair is controlled by the Senate. I don't know how that got in there. To fix it takes 2/3 of both bodies to pass something. The Senate's not inclined to change that rule because they have total control of the chairman. The House wants it fixed where we share the chair. We still have the nuclear option, though, if we don't share the chair. If the Senate gets to a point where they say we won't share the chair, then we'll just meet separately. We've done that in the past. It takes a little more time. I would prefer that the committees work together. But if we get to the position where we can't work together, we can always separate the committee.
We have also separated the budgets, like we referenced. We've got the base maintenance budget and then the enhancements for the new year. You said that's been going well. We still saw several budgets, though, that made it out of committee, that were then voted down on the floor and sent back to committee. Talk to me about that. You don't seem concerned about that being
No,
an
because
issue.
the base budget's got through, right? The base budget has what it takes to keep the lights on. The base budget has the essentials, right? The base budget, if you have it, everything else is an add-on. The problem are, now that those add-ons stand by themselves, I think it's not a problem, but others think it's a problem, is that now that they stand on themselves, sometimes there's not a majority support for some of the items they want to add on to those budgets. And when there's not a majority support, they fail. But it also makes it more transparent. You know what those items are, and it's worked to help keep the budgets in check. It's worked also to help keep the public informed on what's out there. There's more transparency now. It's not hidden in a big, huge maintenance budget. So it's worked to the advantage of the taxpayer, and it's also helped us as we've tried to control and bring those budgets back in check. For years, they were out of control. Now you're seeing more control, you're seeing more input, you're seeing more collaboration between the Senate and the House on those budgets, and you're seeing those budgets come down, which is ultimately the goal. We want to take care of government, we want to do what needs to be done, but those add-ons really need to be necessary for them to pass, and that's why some of them didn't pass this year.
It's been a big focus this year from a lot of the freshmen in the legislature, as well as the leadership, making sure we're not growing government. How do you personally, as Representative Moyle, not as Speaker, how do you draw that line between making sure we're not growing government, but we're still paying for the things that we do need to pay for?
Well, you saw that this year with the maintenance budgets, right? With this super high inflation and everything else, they increased 5%. Most of it was for salaries as we tried to take care of our state employees, but it had other add-ons in there. But we're trying to make that balance, right? And so I think that this budget being separate the way they are helps us accomplish that. But there's always those that will say no to everything. And it's easy to say no, but as legislators, you have to find solutions and you have to listen to people's concerns. You know, we had an issue with water in Eastern Idaho this year, for example. That was a necessary add-on to those budgets, in my humble opinion, to fix that problem and to help not only Eastern Idaho, but the whole state. And so while I get those that think we should do nothing and they all voted no, fine, whatever, ultimately we have to take care of the problems in the state too. And that's why the process, I think, is working. And you saw that, for example, with the water issue and others, where there was something that was necessary, it meets that standard, and we add that to those budgets because it is necessary.
On the other side of the ledger, legislature also cut taxes by a pretty great,
Heck yeah.
real sizable amount this year. Talk to me about those tax cuts.
Hey, we did a good job. We cut back over $400 million in taxes, income, property, sales. We hit all the spectrums, which is good. And if Idaho wants to be competitive, we're going to need to keep doing it. Interesting enough, we had the largest income tax reduction this year in Idaho history, yet 5 other states, I believe, cut their taxes even more than Idaho. So when you look at all the states nationally, we went down and not up, even though we cut so much in taxes. So we've got to do more on that line to keep the tax burden on Idaho in check with surrounding states that we compete for with jobs and with employees and with citizens. And so we're making progress there. We had a great year, but there's still more to do, in my opinion.
Do we really need to try that hard to be so competitive? We're one of the fastest growing states in the nation, and that has its own problems.
Yeah, but I still, in taxes, if you think it's a good idea to tax so high to keep them out of here, they're still going to come because of what we have in Idaho with the resources. And I mean, where else can you go and have the safe communities we have here, the beautiful background? You can head to the hills from Boise, for example, in 5 minutes, in about every other state in this, every other city in the state. We're just so blessed. They're going to keep coming.
You are the longest serving lawmaker in the State House currently.
Don't tell anybody.
Well, there's a reason you're in that speaker's chair these days. Taxes, lowering taxes, cutting taxes has been pretty much your mission your entire time in office. You frequently say it's the whole reason you ran in the first place.
It is. It's the only reason I ran, and it's the only reason I stay here.
And you're still here. At
Yeah.
one point, do you say, mission accomplished, we've done it, taxes are low enough?
Well, I used to always say it's when we got income taxes below 5%, but I may need to make that 4. I don't know. There's always more to do. The interesting thing is about being in the legislature is the longer you're here, you get a knowledge of the other things that go on, like we talked about with the budgets and with schools and with transportation and with taxes. You start getting a bigger knowledge and you start understanding where the things are that need to be fixed. And you saw that this year in the legislature. We fixed a lot of things that have needed fixed for a long time. And that's because the longer you're here, the more you understand what needs fixed and how to get it done. So I've been very blessed. Don't know how long the voters will let me stay, but I've been very blessed to cut more taxes than anybody in our history, had more impact on roads and schools and other things. You're seeing that, for example, with some of the tax cuts as we're trying to delve into having the state build the buildings instead of the property taxpayers. So we're making progress in all those pieces, and that's all part of being here and having that institutional knowledge and finding paths to solve those problems.
On that topic of fixes, not an ongoing issue, but kind of a newer issue that's emerged. Last year, the legislature passed what's called the Parental Rights Act. For folks who aren't familiar, it requires parental knowledge and consent for any sort of medical treatment for children. Stakeholders, especially sexual assault nurses, have been concerned about the effects of that law now. The Senate passed a bill that would have made some tweaks and some changes. It made its way over to the House pretty close to the end of session.
Yeah, I think it was the second to last day.
So it didn't get taken up over on the House side, but talk to me about the House's perspective on that issue. You guys really weren't part of that discussion until the end of session, and it didn't make it through.
Yeah, the Senate had the advantage to having started with that bill and working it through, and that bill originally came from the pro tem. And last year, after it was implemented, there was some issues that arose that need fix. And there's some examples like with children that maybe are raped and whether or not they need parental consent to get a kid. There's some things that need fixed. The problem with it was we didn't get it till the second to the last day of the legislature, and the House didn't have time to engage. There were a lot of people that wanted additional amendments. I think the Senate amended that bill, if I remember correctly, so they had some time to work on it. Sometimes when you have a big issue like that, it takes a couple of years to resolve it. And sometimes when you have a big issue like that that comes so late in the year and there are so many pieces, and there's a lot of pieces in that bill, it gets hard to get it fixed, especially at the end like that. I do know that at the last day before we left, there were some possible amendments on my desk that came up from people that were concerned. I do know the issue's not going to go away. There's some things there that we absolutely need to fix, and I agree with the pro tem, it needs addressed. But I think that we need to get the House a little more engaged so they understand why it's important and what the issues are. And it just came so late that didn't happen.
Another piece of legislation that you all passed that took effect has to do with the flags that are able to be flown at city and county and local governments, schools as well.
I hear a lot about that lately.
There's been a bit of a controversy recently about specifically the pride flag that flies in front of City Hall. Are we going to see a special session to add some penalties to that law?
The special session would either have to come from the governor requesting us to come back for a specific subject. He could call us back to fix that issue. The legislature now has the ability to call themselves back, but it takes 60%. I don't know if there's a 60% that want to come back. I know there is at least 50%. I don't know if you get to the threshold to come back. I do know there's some issues some ideas out there to fix it. I've got a draft that I put together, for example, that a lot of people in the state of Idaho don't realize that all the sales tax dollars, when you spend money in sales tax, 20% of that, roughly 20%, goes back to the cities, counties, the highway district, the fire districts, library. It goes back to those taxing districts. And so I've got a draft up there that just says, hey, when you break the law, we're going to hold your quarterly distribution from those revenue sharing from those sales tax dollars. And to give you an example, last year in the city of Boise, I think they received from the state in sales tax revenue sharing about $26 million. So we would, each quarter that they broke the law by flying the flag, we would take their $5 or $6 million and put it into the tax relief fund and give it back to the taxpayers for tax relief. That's the idea that the speaker has. There's other ideas out there, I'm sure, that will come up, but I think that there are a lot of people concerned that when the legislature passes laws, that local government entities think that they don't have to obey them. Remember, the legislature's here and the city's down here. And so when you have situations where people think it's okay to break the law, like the city of Boise, I think it's incumbent upon the legislature to make sure that there is I don't know about a price, but that there's consequences for your actions of not obeying the law. And so I think you'll see some bills. I've told you the one that I have. I've heard of some others that are probably a little more draconian. But I think that there are some individuals that are upset and take the flag issue away. It's not about the flag anymore. It's about the fact that you have a law and you have a sitting elected official breaking her constitutional responsibilities when she upheld her arm to uphold the Constitution of the state of Idaho. She's now breaking that because she says the legislature doesn't matter and the laws don't matter. When you get a situation like that, that concerns me, because when you have anarchy, this whole thing could fall. And we don't need anarchy. We don't need people breaking the law. We need to work within the realm. If the good mayor doesn't like the law, she can bring a law to change that. That's her prerogative. But to go out and say there's a law in the books and I don't care, I'm not going to enforce it, concerns me.
Because that's the issue we've run into. AG Labrador, the local sheriff, have said there's no mechanism for us to follow up on this.
It's still the law, though. All that aside, it's still the law. And I'll bet that when we delve into this, we're going to find other situations where there's laws that some government agencies or districts aren't obeying. I'm sure there's more out there. And as we talk about the DOJ thing, that could tie into that. We're going to have that task force on DOJ this summer. And that might give us some angles, because we're going to go look at how we can consolidate state agencies. We're going to go look at how we can adjust and look at the number of employees we have and some things we can do there. We're going to look at travel. We're looking at the statutes, and we're currently looking at the rules. All the stuff that we're talking about here on the DOJ task force this summer, it kind of ties into situations like that. I think we're going to find other laws that agencies, and not just the cities, I'm sure there are other people and state agencies probably even, that aren't obeying the law. And we need to get to where we have that fixed, that they understand you don't obey the law, there's going to be consequences.
And for anybody who's not familiar, that DOJ task force, referencing the Federal Department of Government Efficiency, legislatures appointed a task force to review.
Yep,
at the state level.
We passed a bill early in the session, the pro tem and myself, that says we're going to look. We give the agencies until September 1st to bring us all their statutes that they think are outdated, aren't necessary, or could be replaced. So they'll bring those to us the 1st of September so we can get stuff drafted on that. You've seen what we've been doing on the rules for years. We'll continue that. And then the next step is to look at our state employees and our state agencies and finding a way to combine those to save and get rid of inefficiencies.
And doing so in a way that's reoccurring so we don't have to do this again in 50 years.
Exactly. We want to make it happen, and there's a way to do this where we'll all benefit, and hopefully that'll help us get some more money for tax relief.
Speaking of tax relief, to bring us back around to taxes, the parental choice tax credit, $50 million tax credit to help parents pay for private school expenses. You were a pretty big pusher of that policy. Why was school choice the issue coming into this session?
I think that for years, it's one of those pent-up issues. You saw it every year for many years, and each year the ball moved closer and closer to the finish line. And I think that after this last election, there was more support to take and resolve that issue, and we got that done. I think there'll be some more adjustments to that bill in the future as we see how it works, because it's new to Idaho. I think we're the first state that has a tax credit. I think it's smarter. We'll know they're Idaho citizens. But there's going to be some waters to navigate here as we go forward to make sure that it does what we want it to do, and that it doesn't hurt our public school. That wasn't the intention. And that we're successful in making it a program that is successful not only for our parents, but for our children, and making Idaho a better place, and improving our education system. That's what we're all about.
The critics of this policy are very concerned that that $50 million will grow. What's your, I know it's still early and we haven't actually running the tax credit yet, but what's your impression of that so far?
I think you got to give it time to see, right? It's easy to be critic, but what are they being critics of? It's not been in place. It's kind of disingenuous to complain until you see how it's going to operate. And that's why I said what I said a minute ago. Once it gets in operation, if there's some issues we can resolve, we'll resolve them if we have some problems. But to complain about it before it's even been in place is kind of, it's water under the bridge. It doesn't matter yet because you don't know yet. You got to let it work its course. See what the problems, if there are any, really are. And until it's been in place, you won't know.
As we're implementing it in the tax commission in the next year moving forward, how are you confident that we'll have the transparency and the government efficiency when it comes to that pool of $50 million like we have with the other projects?
I think you will for sure. And I think that was one of the concerns on the front end. And there's some stuff in that bill to help that. And I know that if we find some holes in that, I'm sure we'll fix it. Because that was one of the concerns and one of the things that was brought up on the front end of that bill.
Another topic that the legislature addressed is immigration. It's a big topic nationally with the Trump administration and everything going on there. A bill to enable state and local law enforcement to help ICE with this immigration enforcement has been held up in the courts. Talk to me about that policy and why the legislature felt it was important for the state to be involved in this.
Yeah, other states have started that. I believe Texas is one of them. And I think that the courts held it up for a short term, and not all of it, just part of it. And we'll see how that plays out. There's a lot moving nationally on that issue. And immigration and concern about illegal immigration is one of the top issues when you go out in the hinterlands in Idaho. People are concerned about it. They want it fixed. They want those who are here illegally gone. They're okay with the path forward on legal. And I think if you look at that bill, that was one of the many bills that were introduced along that issue of immigration. There was a couple that were held up in committee, for example, like E-Verify and some others that Chairman Crane held. I think that there will be a path forward on those next year too. I think that this was just one step and many steps that the legislature is going to take in regards to trying to address that issue. We do allow, and I think that a lot of our sheriffs are now helping ICE as they try to pick up some of those individuals that are criminals, that have a background, maybe a DUI, or they've beaten up a spouse or something else. Or a girlfriend or whatever. So I think you're seeing that issue is being resolved locally too, and that ICE is more involved now in collecting those individuals that are the criminal element of those who are here illegally and sending them back. And I think you'll see more of that. That bill, we'll see what the courts do with it. If there's some concerns, I think we'll address them next year to make sure, because I think that we're pretty adamant that those who are here committing crimes need to go.
Another immigration bill that's not held up by the courts, House Bill 135, got rid of eligibility for public benefits for people who are here without documentation. Why was that a priority for the House members?
Do you think it's really wise that we're using our taxpayers' dollars to pay for benefits for somebody who's here illegally? I mean, really? Come on, we want those guys out of here. They're not U.S. citizens. They're not here legally. Why should we be subsidizing them? I mean, that's just common sense. We shouldn't be paying for that crap.
There are other arguments, though, too, when it comes to communicable diseases. Even if that person doesn't have documentation, they can still spread it to
Well, they shouldn't
American
be
citizens.
here if they have that stuff. Remember, we're talking about illegal aliens. We're talking about people that are here illegally. That's the problem. And so I agree there's some concerns with that, but they shouldn't be here. And I shouldn't be paying for their stuff if they're here illegally.
You mentioned E-Verify also, which is a workforce program verifying that people being employed are here with legal status. That, like you referenced, didn't make it through the legislature this year. What's next on that path?
I don't know why Chairman Crane held that up. And I'm sure there was a reason. I know that our friends in the dairy industry were concerned about that. Being an employer myself, if you have somebody who has a social security number that doesn't match, they're going to notify you anyway. I mean, it's out there. So I don't know what the concern was with that bill. I need to talk to the chairman and find out. I know that there was a lot of support for that. I think there still is support for that, and I'm sure you'll see it again next year for sure. I don't know if there was some concerns the way it was written. Hopefully we can find a path forward on that though, because I think it's pretty popular with a lot of our friends.
Okay. Well, we'll let you head back out to the farm.
I'm going to go plant some corn.
Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, thanks for being so generous with your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.